Gotta say, it's fantastic.
Say that again?
It's fantastic.
Yes, it is.
This movie is exactly what Marvel needs right now. I was very happy after seeing this. I am actually recording this the night of seeing it in the car with my wife. And I just had to talk about it immediately because I am a giant Fantastic Four fan. And after all of the versions we've gotten before, it is very nice to see one done this well on the big screen. And in a sea of Fantastic Four reviews or discussions or whatever you want to call them, I appreciate you choosing mine. In this review, or whatever you want to call this, there will be slight spoilers, or actually probably major spoilers towards the end, but I'll give a warning towards that once we get to it. But overall, this movie was really great. The family dynamic, number one, is like one of the main things they had to nail, and they definitely did that, especially with Johnny and Ben. I mean, it's been kind of talked about in the interviews recently where they make each other laugh and stuff, and they're cracking jokes where, people are like, oh yeah, this is definitely Johnny and Ben. But I mean, even in the movie, it really hits home. And honestly, they were like my favorite parts of the movie. Although I will say Pedro as Reed was also very surprising because I was not really sold on that casting when they announced it at all. And then when I saw that he just looks like Pedro Pascal in a Fantastic Four sweater, I was even a little bit more skeptical. And not to mention, he's everywhere and it's kind of popular to hate on him now. But yeah, he was pretty good in this movie. I liked how he played it more like, he played it enough to where he was like caring enough, but also, kind of mad scientist, like, always worrying about everything, just kind of being how Reed Richards is supposed to be. And Sue Storm is also a really great, part of this. Last but not least, I mean, she is, really great, and she's honestly super powerful. I mean, there was a lot of, people that were in this movie, a lot of like villains, but I don't want to get too ahead of myself, but, she handles one of them pretty easily. And I mean, I was even shocked because I knew she was powerful, but I mean, they've just never really shown it like this in the movies. Another thing I really loved about this was how we just kind of jumped right into their world. Like, there really was no waiting around. The movie literally started and I thought it was kind of an ad or one of those like pre-movie things they do where they talk to the audience, but no, you were just kind of in the movie and it was going. So that was really cool because it felt like a world that was like really lived in and like this team has existed in. None of it felt forced. It didn't feel like you were watching a script come to life. It just kind of felt like you were watching these people in their everyday lives, and it was cool to see how they incorporated the kind of the backstory. Because with a team like this, especially, it's kind of weird where they're not that widely known to where it's something like Batman where everybody knows his origin, but they're also not as obscure as something like Blue Beetle or, the Guardians of the Galaxy, where you have to explain how they come together. So I think it was really cool the way they incorporated like flashbacks, or they kind of did like a news broadcast in this to explain their origins. So that was really cool that they respected where they came from, but also, they really just hit the ground running and didn't waste your time too much. And they did it in a way that wasn't really like exposition heavy, which I appreciated. Speaking of hitting the ground running, this plot is like really nice. I liked it a lot, and I think it's going to be something that actually deters a lot of people because it's a funny thing with these comic book movies where people, they complain and they bitch and moan when it's just people punching each other or, fighting a blue beam in the sky. But then when it's something different, they also complain, and they complain that it's not people punching each other and not enough of it. So you really can't win no matter which way you go. But this movie had a really interesting one where it's like there is definitely fighting, but there's also not as much as you would probably expect going into this or, a Fantastic Four movie. And that might kind of upset some people, but for me, I actually really enjoyed the way it went. I feel like it flowed and it made sense. And I mean, it's no spoiler to know that Galactus is the main threat. And when Galactus is your main threat, there's really not much punching you can do that's going to really do anything or make any sense. So I'm glad they didn't like force some, cringy punching moments like that, or they didn't dumb him down. They definitely they definitely delivered on, Galactus and his effect in this movie. He's not a giant gas cloud like the original 2007 sequel Fantastic Four movie we got. So that was pretty nice to see. And not to mention Ralph Ineson's voice as Galactus is, unsurprisingly amazing. And when he was cast, everybody knew he was gonna, kind of knock it out of the park with that. But seeing it in theaters with the surround sounds, and I imagine if you see it in IMAX, it's even better. It's very commanding and threatening, and just his stature mixed with the voice is just very intimidating. And this movie does a really good job of showing you the stakes, or making you feel the stakes, that is. Because, it does a really good job of showing you how smart Reed is, but then when it comes time for this problem, he really cannot figure it out. And I love it because they kind of went over a lot of stuff I feel like the audience would be thinking, because there's a lot of solutions I was thinking. I was like, oh, why don't you just do this? But then, they had an answer for that and an answer for that. So it was cool to see him kind of working through his process, and having a character like him is really effective because you could show a lot of the threat in such a subtle way by just, he doesn't have an equation for it. He doesn't have a solution. He just doesn't know how to win. So that's a really great thing to do. It's kind of like, Iron Man or, in Infinity War when they were asking, how many they win out of, however many million, they only win one. So it's really cool to see moments like that because it gives you real like weight to the situation. Like, oh shit, yeah, they are not gonna get out of this, empty-handed. So that was all really cool. Now I'm gonna get into the spoiler section, and I'm gonna talk about a lot of the stuff that I have been honestly dying to talk about, because there's a huge post-credit scene, and a lot happens towards the end of this movie. So you have been warned. But getting into spoilers, I think this is a spoiler, which is why I'm putting it here. I love the inclusion of Mole Man. I didn't see him in any of the trailers, although I did try to avoid them after a certain point. But I love the inclusion of him and, Subterranea. That's in the comics. And I love when Marvel does stuff like that. They did it with, the Quantum Realm and Ant-Man. And I love seeing the little miniature worlds like that were so interesting to see in the comics. And I thought his addition was pretty good. It reminded me a lot of the Underminer from The Incredibles, but then again, a lot of this movie reminded me of The Incredibles, which is definitely not a bad thing at all. I actually really liked that part of it. The whole vibe was, really done awesome. But, getting on to Galactus and the Silver Surfer, they were both amazing. The Silver Surfer actually had a lot more depth than I expected it to, which I guess is not a very high bar considering what they did to the 2007 Silver Surfer. They kind of, he was kind of one-dimensional to say the least, but here she had an interesting, like, kind of, I don't want to say romance, but like a weird thing with Johnny. And then she had a very interesting and honestly kind of heartbreaking backstory that you understand why she is, heralding these planets for Galactus and why she's doing what she's doing. But at the end of the day, she ends up, helping the team, and it's not one of those moments where you're like, oh, of course. It's like, it genuinely shocked my wife and I, because we kind of thought Johnny was gonna, go into the black hole or the wormhole with Galactus. And if you don't know, which you probably should, you definitely should not be learning spoilers about this movie from a random YouTube video. It's way more, it's way better than that. You deserve, you should see it in theaters. But they try to set up these teleportation devices across the globe to, teleport the Earth away from Galactus, to move the heaven and the skies, as, Reed says in the movie. But that doesn't end up working because the Silver Surfer destroys most of them, leaving the one in New York. And that's where our main, conflict takes place. But then this is also where Sue gets to really showcase her power, because she single-handedly pushes Galactus like into the wormhole, as he has Franklin in his hand. Reed's trying to get to Franklin because Galactus wants Franklin to kind of take his place as the Devourer, so Galactus can finally rest. And that's kind of the whole setup of the movie. I just didn't mention that before because I feel like that is a spoiler. I think they hit it pretty well. I mean, I feel like you knew there was probably something with Franklin, but especially if you're not familiar with the comics, you wouldn't really know where that was going. But yeah, I mean, I thought it was interesting to see her power showcased because Galactus was definitely not weakened or dumbed down in this movie, but she single-handedly pushed him to where he needed to be to fall into the wormhole. He started to climb his way out, and Johnny's heading towards him, and the Silver Surfer deflects him, and she sacrifices herself, and it's a really nice moment because it feels pretty earned. Because you could tell at an earlier point in the movie, she doesn't really agree with what she's doing, but she knows that she's doing it for her world and her family. So I'm interested, honestly, to see where this goes because, like, I don't know if the next time we see Galactus will be with the Fantastic Four or in a different project entirely, but I'm interested to see, what her consequences are for doing that. So that was really cool. Sue does die doing this, though. It takes out a lot of her power. It drains a lot of her power. And Franklin actually brings her back to life. And a lot of people were surprised in the theater, but it's if you don't know anything about Franklin in the comics, honestly, that is an entire video in and of itself. But they joke in the movie. They were like, they call him a space god or like a god, and I mean that's not really too far off base. Franklin basically is a god, especially in certain storylines in the comics. So it's interesting to see a baby that powerful. Again, it reminds me of The Incredibles with Jack, which is pretty funny, but it's also kind of terrifying how powerful he is because I mean it's crazy to see where they're going to take him. Now moving on, they're wrapping up everything. They're going back on that talk show, but then they get an emergency alert. You have a really funny moment with them trying to strap the car seat into the car. That's not something I'm looking forward to having to figure out how to do when I become a dad because I can barely figure out how to do stuff for myself, let alone those car seats. They look very complicated, and so I'm glad it was a nice little funny moment that all these geniuses basically couldn't figure this out. But moving on from that, it cuts to a post-credit scene 4 years later of Sue with Franklin on the couch. She goes to grab another book because he wants a different one, and when she returns, it kind of slows down. She starts to bring her powers out, and you see a green hood, Franklin playing with the person on the hood's face, and a silver mask. And obviously, if you know that's Doctor Doom. Now, the interesting thing with this is they didn't show his face, and the mask, I could be wrong, but the mask looked literally exactly like the one Robert Downey Jr. wore at the reveal of his casting as Doctor Doom. And I'm going to put a picture here. So, I mean, if not, I could be wrong, like I said. It kind of also looked like an Iron Man mask, but I kind of thought it was the one from the reveal of him at Comic-Con. But I do think it is very interesting that they didn't show his face, considering definitely by the time this cameo was filmed, they for sure knew Downey was going to be Doctor Doom. He was probably near the set, if not on the set. And I feel like they definitely know what he's going to look like. Maybe they're trying to save what he looks like. But, my theory has always kind of been, I think the Robert Downey Jr. casting is a red herring. I think they did it because obviously that name alone brings a lot of attention. And it's pissed a lot of people off. Not me personally. Honestly, I would be fine if he's not a red herring and he just is Doctor Doom. I think of all people, Robert Downey Jr. can pull that role off. But that being said, I do think it is like a misdirection. I personally think the real Doom is going to come in and just rip Robert Downey Jr.'s Doom's heart out of his chest. And I have a lot of interesting actors I would kind of want for that. My main pick being Cillian Murphy. I think he would do amazing. He has a good relationship with Robert Downey Jr. I'm sure he's probably spoken to Marvel already about it because he just kind of fits the whole Doctor Doom vibe. So, I mean, we'll see it because there could be a crazy theory reason for why they didn't show his face, and there could just be a normal one being like, well, we wanted to save the reveal for, his movie, Doomsday. But this raises a lot of questions like, where does this moment go from here? Is the ship that we see at the end of Thunderbolts, is that carrying Doctor Doom and Franklin? what does Doom want Franklin for? Like, there's so many questions this raises, and honestly, I might just make a separate video going over all of those, like, kind of theories about where I think things will go from here, because that ship, you know, Marvel shows things very specifically for specific reasons. Like, they show you the outside of the ship, they don't show you any more. They don't show you, like, you know, the people in the ship talking about arriving at a different universe or a different dimension. So I think the people on that ship is definitely a secret, and I don't think it's going to be who you exactly expect. However, going into this movie, I'm not going to lie, I kind of did think Galactus would win and just destroy their entire Earth, and that would just be the team kind of escaping in shame. And they even kind of mentioned that in this movie with the Silver Surfer telling Johnny, like, you know, save yourselves and hope that you live long enough to forgive yourselves, because that's the only way you're getting out of this. So overall, I really liked the stakes of this movie. I liked the family dynamic. All the actors were good in their roles, and honestly, they caught me off guard by how much I liked them in their roles. The villains were amazing. The storyline was great. The aesthetics were great. The special effects. I mean, honestly, I don't really have much to complain about, aside from the fact that, like, I kind of just wanted more movie. Honestly, most Marvel movies are longer in length, and this one I feel like is pretty shorter. I don't remember what it was exactly. I think it was like 2 hours and 5 minutes, if that. But I just kind of wanted more movie, and I wanted to see things fleshed out more. Sometimes I feel like it went a little fast, and where I'm like, dang, this is like really interesting. Can we just kind of, like, you know, slow down a little bit? But like I said, some people might have an issue with how slow it went in the first place. They might have wanted more fighting and more action. So who knows? If you did stick around this long, I do appreciate it. I appreciate you, you know, taking your time listening to what I have to say. I am interested to hear what you guys have to say in the comments below. Try to keep it semi-spoiler free for those that are clicking on this, you know, just wanting the review part or the initial thoughts. But definitely let me know what you thought. And, you know, if I make another theory video in a few days or not, we can maybe talk spoilers in the comments there. But it might be a while until I do make that, because I will be out of town the next week. So I'll get to that as soon as I can. But also, I kind of want to take some time to really craft my theories and, you know, think about what I want to say. So I appreciate you watching this video. But yeah, that's about it.